Loretta Lynn and Conway Twitty were country music's most beloved duet partners. On stage, they laughed, harmonized, and held each other like old friends. But off stage, what they shared was something no one else fully understood. For more than 20 years, they toured together, protected each other, and leaned on one another through personal storms. When Conway died suddenly in 1993, Loretta went quiet. She said very little, but now, decades later, something has come to light. A final gift, something Conway gave her privately, something she never shared, not with the press, not even with most of her family. And what fans are only now discovering has changed everything they thought they knew about Loretta Lynn's most important relationship. Because this gift, kept hidden for 30 years, was never about show business. It was about loyalty, love, and the one person who never let her down. In the late 1960s, Loretta Lynn had already carved out her place in country music. She wasn't just the coal miner's daughter. She was a force, bold, self-written, and unmistakably honest. But the industry she worked in was tough, male-dominated, competitive, and lonely. Then along came Conway Twitty. Conway was already a household name by the time their paths crossed. Known first for his pop hit, It's Only Make Believe, he'd made the leap into country with a deep voice and brooding presence that instantly resonated with fans. But when he teamed up with Loretta in 1971 for their first duet, After the Fire Is Gone, something unexpected happened. They didn't just sound good together, they sounded like they were meant to sing together. The chemistry was immediate, not just musical, but something deeper. Loretta later said that when they sang together, it was like our voices were having their own conversation. She trusted him in a way she didn't trust most men in Nashville. And he, in return, treated her with a gentleness and professionalism that stood in stark contrast to what she often experienced behind closed doors. Their first album together was a hit, so were the next two. By 1973, they were a duo in demand, touring together, co-headlining shows, and appearing on television specials. Fans started speculating. Was there something more going on between them? Loretta was married, of course, and she always maintained that she and Conway were never romantically involved. But she never denied the bond they shared. And the more they toured together, the more obvious it became. Conway wasn't just a singing partner. He was her safe place in an industry that rarely offered one. He knew when to step forward and when to step back. He helped her navigate deals, stood up for her when others talked down to her, and quietly handled business when her husband, became difficult. She later reflected that Conway was one of the only men in her life who never tried to control her. And that meant everything. What fans saw on stage, those tight embraces, shared glances, the way Loretta would laugh at Conway's soft jokes, wasn't an act. It was real affection, real loyalty, and real emotional connection. By the mid-70s, they were releasing hit after hit. Louisiana Woman, Mississippi Man, Feelin's, You're the Reason Our Kids Are Ugly. And while the titles often played with the idea of a married couple squabbling or flirting, the real story behind the scenes was quieter and far more meaningful. Loretta once said in a radio interview, "People ask if we were ever in love. No, but we loved each other. There's a difference." She called him her musical soulmate. He called her his favorite person to sing with. They never had to explain it. It was just there. And as the years went on, through personal tragedy, changing music trends, and the physical toll of constant touring, Conway remained a constant in Loretta's life. He was the one man in the business who never asked her to be anything other than herself. That kind of loyalty, it doesn't come around often, and it doesn't go away quietly. As the spotlight grew brighter, so did the expectations. Loretta Lynn and Conway Twitty weren't just duet partners anymore. They had become country royalty. Their names were practically stitched together in the minds of fans. Conway and Loretta. Loretta and Conway. Always together. Always in harmony. And yet, away from the flashing lights and award shows, something far more enduring was unfolding. Their friendship was deepening into something rare. An emotional alliance that neither one of them ever put into words, but both clearly understood. They toured relentlessly, At times, more than 200 dates a year. That meant long bus rides, backstage meals, late-night dressing rooms, and shared hotel floors in unfamiliar towns. Loretta later admitted that she often felt more at ease sitting in Conway's dressing room talking about their lives than she ever did going home to face Stu's unpredictable moods. Conway knew her rhythms. He could tell when she was overwhelmed, when the media got too loud, or when she'd had a fight with her husband. He didn't pry, he just showed up. Sometimes it was with a joke. Sometimes it was with a gentle hand on her back as they walked toward the stage. And sometimes it was just with quiet. He didn't ask her to explain, and she never felt she had to. Loretta described Conway as the only man in her career who made her feel like she didn't have to prove herself. There was no competition, no power struggle, just deep respect. When she lost her son Jack in a tragic drowning accident in 1984, it was Conway. Not the label, not her manager, not even some of her closest female friends, who dropped everything and flew in to be with her. "I didn't even have to call," she once said. "He just showed up." They were opposites in some ways. Loretta was fiery, outspoken, a straight shooter raised in the hollers of Kentucky. Conway was quiet, deliberate, with a calm southern drawl and a preference for letting others speak first. But maybe that's why it worked. They balanced each other on stage and off. Of course, the rumors never stopped. Some fans swore they were secretly in love. Others speculated that they had a quiet affair that no one dared speak about. But both Conway and Loretta shut it down every time they were asked. "We were close," Conway once said, "but it wasn't like that." And Loretta? She just smiled and said, "Conway was the only man besides my husband I ever let put his arm around me in public." Still, that didn't stop fans from watching them like hawks. Every glance, every handhold during a ballad, every time Loretta leaned into Conway as he sang something soft. It all fed the idea that theirs was more than a musical partnership. It was emotional, spiritual, some even said eternal. And maybe they were right in a way, because as the years went on, even as their solo careers continued, Loretta and Conway kept returning to each other. More albums, more duets, more time together. They didn't need the charts to tell them what they already knew. Their voices just made sense together. Behind the scenes, their bond grew stronger. Loretta confided in Conway things she didn't share with anyone else in Nashville. He, in turn, trusted her with his fears about aging, the pressure of staying relevant, and his longing to leave behind something more than just hit records. They weren't lovers. They weren't just friends. They were something that didn't need a name. But when that kind of bond is taken away suddenly, the silence it leaves behind can be deafening. It happened without warning. On June 4th, 1993, Conway Twitty collapsed while on tour in Branson, Missouri. He had just finished a performance and was heading to the next stop when he suddenly fell ill. The diagnosis was an abdominal aneurysm, a silent killer. He was rushed to the hospital, but it was too late. At just 59 years old, the man whose voice had once filled arenas went still. The news hit the country music world like a thunderclap. Tributes poured in from fans, fellow artists, and broadcasters. But one person didn't speak at all: Loretta Lynn. She didn't issue a statement. She didn't appear on talk shows. She didn't perform. Instead, she quietly withdrew. Those close to her said she was shaken beyond words. And for someone as outspoken and grounded as Loretta, that silence said everything. In later years, Loretta would say that losing Conway felt different than anything she'd experienced before. She had lost friends, family, even her own children. But this was different. This wasn't just about death. It was about unfinished business. She hadn't been there. Conway died far from home, and Loretta didn't get a final moment to say goodbye. She would later tell her daughter that she kept imagining what she would have said, how she would have thanked him for every song, every small kindness, every moment of safety he'd offered her through the years. Instead, she sat at his funeral quietly, near the back. No big speeches, no public tributes, just Loretta, in a black dress, eyes fixed forward, holding a single white flower. Fans expected something grand, a televised duet montage, a tearful onstage performance in his memory. But Loretta didn't give them that. She couldn't. Something about Conway's passing was too personal, too raw. And so she mourned him in silence. For a woman who had built her career on saying what others were too afraid to, writing about cheating men, birth control, and broken homes, this moment of stillness was striking. And confusing to many, but there was a reason for it. What few people knew was that Loretta had already received something from Conway. Not a gift in the traditional sense, but a gesture. A small, private one. Something that had arrived weeks earlier, tucked inside an envelope with no fanfare. Loretta never spoke about it publicly. Not to her fans. Not to the press. Not even to her band. It would take nearly 30 years before anyone else even knew it existed. Because to Loretta, Conway wasn't just a friend. He was the only man she had never had to explain herself to. And the thought that she wouldn't hear his voice again, wouldn't feel the quiet calm of his presence behind the stage curtain, wasn't something she could share in a song or an interview. It was grief that stayed inside. She canceled several tour dates in the months that followed and refused to sing their duets with any other partner. When asked why, she simply said, "It wouldn't be right." She never replaced him. Not on stage. Not in her heart. In time, the world moved on. New duets were recorded, new stars rose, and the public fascination faded. But Loretta carried that absence with her. Every time she performed one of their songs solo, she left a space, just wide enough for Conway's voice to fill, if only in her mind. And what she carried in secret stayed with her, until someone else found it. It wasn't until after Loretta Lynn's own passing in October of 2022 that her family began going through her belongings at Hurricane Mills, the sprawling Tennessee ranch she called home for decades. Among the dusty tour trunks and handwritten lyrics, they found something tucked inside a drawer in her bedroom. An envelope. Inside it, a photograph of Loretta and Conway, taken sometime in the early 1980s. They were side by side on stage, laughing mid-song, eyes turned toward each other in a way that didn't need explanation. On the back of the photo, in Conway's unmistakable handwriting, was a short message. "Don't let them forget us. We still have one more in us." It was dated just a few weeks before his death. Beside the photo, folded with care, was a lyric sheet. A rough sketch of a song they had started working on together. Something soft, slow, intimate, not meant for radio play but for each other. The working title? "The Last Time I'll Say Goodbye." Loretta never mentioned this song publicly. She never recorded it. And she never showed anyone the note. Until now, no one knew it existed. Not even her closest collaborators. Her daughter, Patsy Lynn Russell, reportedly found the envelope and quietly showed it to the family. She later told a friend that her mother had kept it in a place no one would ever think to look, like she was protecting something too sacred for the world. This was the final gift. Not money, not jewelry, not a Grammy, but a memory, a private moment captured in ink and lyric. An unspoken promise between two artists who understood each other better than most couples ever could. The song draft itself was sparse. A verse and a chorus. Loretta's handwriting scribbled notes in the margins. Her traditional edits, her shorthand phrases for melody, and little arrows pointing to where she thought Con might add a harmony line. It was clear they had begun something, and that she hadn't finished it. Not because she forgot, but because she couldn't. In a later journal entry, Loretta had written just one line beneath a date marked a year after Conway's death. "Can't sing it without you." That was it. For all her strength, her grit, and her no-nonsense attitude, Loretta had limits. And the idea of finishing that song, their song, without the man she considered her musical soulmate was simply too painful. To fans, the discovery of this final gift confirms what many had long suspected. Their bond was never about fame or publicity. It wasn't for the cameras. It wasn't for the charts. It was real, quiet, and rooted in something deeper than anyone outside of them could define. They weren't lovers, but there was love. They weren't married, but there was loyalty. And they weren't saying goodbye. Not really. When her daughter read the note out loud to the family, the room reportedly fell silent. Not out of shock, but recognition. They had all sensed it. Loretta carried Conway with her for the rest of her life. Every performance, every tribute, every empty microphone beside her. She just never said it out loud. Until now, that photo and note had been tucked away for nearly 30 years. A final, silent gift from the one man she never had to explain herself to. And now that fans know the truth, it's more than just a piece of country music history. It's the closing verse to the most meaningful duet she ever sang. After Conway Twitty's death, Loretta Lynn returned to the stage, but something had changed. The fire was still there, the voice still strong. But when it came time to perform the duets that had made her a household name alongside him, she hesitated. For years, Loretta refused to sing their most iconic songs with anyone else, even as producers and fans urged her to pair up with other male artists. Young, talented, eager to collaborate, she resisted. She wasn't being difficult. She was being loyal. "I don't sing Conway's songs with anyone but Conway," she once said. "I'd rather leave that space empty than try to fill it." And she meant it. On tour, fans would often request Louisiana Woman, Mississippi Man, or Feelin's. And Loretta would smile, nod politely, and move on to the next number. Sometimes, she'd offer a quiet solo version of one of their ballads, but she always left room where his voice should have been. A pause, a harmony unfilled, a gesture so small it might have gone unnoticed, unless you knew what you were listening for. To her, Conway wasn't replaceable. And even as years passed and time softened some of the grief, Loretta never let go of what they had shared. During interviews, she rarely mentioned him by name unless prompted. But when she did, her voice would drop. She'd often pause mid-sentence, her eyes distant, her words slower, like she was choosing them carefully, or maybe trying to hold something back. Once, when asked to name her proudest collaborations, Loretta said, "I've sung with a lot of fine people, but with Conway, it was different. It always felt like home." Fans picked up on it. So did her family. Her daughter Patsy once said, "Mama talked about Daddy a lot, but with Conway it was different, like she was protecting something." That something became even clearer in Loretta's later years. As she aged, she returned more and more to the songs she and Conway had recorded together. At home, in private, she'd play their duets, not always singing along, but just listening, as if the music still anchored her to something solid in a world that was slowly slipping away. And when Loretta finally passed in 2022, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, her family honored her wishes quietly. There were no major tribute concerts, no long televised eulogies, just the playing of one song, "Lead Me On," as they carried her from the chapel. No one had to ask why. The note Conway had written her, "Don't let them forget us," was kept by her bedside until the very end. And in a quiet, private ceremony later that week, the family placed a copy of that photo and note in Loretta's casket. They didn't tell the press. They didn't release statements. It wasn't for headlines. It was for her. Because what Loretta carried for 30 years wasn't just grief. It was devotion. To a man who never crossed the line, never broke her trust, and never stopped showing up for her. A man she never claimed to love in the traditional sense, but who lived in the space between every verse they ever sang together. And while the world may remember them for their music, those who truly knew Loretta understood. She never let go of Conway Twitty, because he never let go of her. In the end, the story of Loretta Lynn and Conway Twitty was never about headlines or romance. It was about something deeper, something quieter. It was about two artists, each carrying their own burdens, finding comfort in each other's presence. It was about protection, loyalty, and unspoken understanding. And now, decades later, with Loretta gone and the truth finally emerging, fans are seeing their connection in a new light. That final gift, the handwritten note, the photo, the unfinished song, none of it was meant for the world. It was meant for her. But now that we know it existed, we also know this. The music wasn't the whole story. The silence between them meant something too. And maybe that's why, even now, when their voices echo from old vinyl records and worn-out tapes, fans still feel it. Because love comes in many forms. And this one, whatever it was, never truly ended. For more emotional stories, check out this video.